Right, yes, I don't know what my eyes were playing tricks on me. This is the final part of this part one, because there's sort of a second area. But this was that question that we were talking about. And the question also asked us to find the break-even in sales revenue, the break-even point in sales revenue, which is what I was talking about, where we found the contribution to sales ratio, which was 25 minus 20, which was 5 divided by 25, because that's the contribution and that's sales, and we found this to be 0.2. And so now, as we do, that the fixed costs are 50,000. So that means that we have 50,000 divided by 0.2 divided by 0.2, and that brings us to a nice £250,000 in terms of break-even revenue. So, and we know this already because we know we need 10,000 units to break even, and that's 25 times 10,000. So that's where we go. So great, and that's E. Now this question is kind of what I was talking about earlier on when we calculated target profit, required profit. In the sales required, well, this is their formula, but ultimately we had fixed costs of 50,000, if you like. So sales revenue. So really the argument here is every time I have a fixed cost, I just have this lovely little formula that can help us literally find whatever we need. So all I have to do is 5,000 plus 40,000, if you like, divided by because ultimately what I'm really saying here is that for me to really say I've arrived, I have to still cover this fixed cost. So technically it is a fixed cost. So technically contribution minus this new fixed cost, which is ultimately 50,000 plus 40,000, is 0. I mean, ultimately I haven't arrived yet because this is a target profit. Think of it like that. So ultimately it means the contribution is equal to 90,000. Ultimately it means I must hit contribution of 90,000. When I've hit contribution of 90,000, I cover all these fixed costs first, then target profit. So technically, if contribution is 90,000, and I know what my ratio of contribution to sales is, I'm told it's 0.2. So I know that contribution is 20% of revenue. So if I know the contribution is 20% of revenue, and I know the contribution is 90,000, therefore revenue is 0.2 is 450,000. So it's just getting your mind around the thinking and the process, and then you finally arrive. You will have here, yes, 40 plus 50 divided by 0.2. You will arrive at your answer. Great. Now, yeah, so very quickly we're done now. I think it's just looking at a few graphs, but nothing that I think you would have not seen before. Thankfully, in your exam, you don't have to draw any graphs, but you need to be comfortable with understanding what's going on. As you can imagine, your fixed costs do not change with your units, so that's your fixed cost line. This is your variable cost. Not typical that you see this variable cost line. What you do see, of course, is your total cost line. As you can imagine, your variable costs are standard. They are increasing with output. And then you have your total cost line, if you like, which increases as well as you go up, if you like. And that's your, sorry, here's your, yeah. So, actually, sorry, you don't have your variable cost line on this one. Sorry, this was sales revenue. So your revenue, so of course, by the way, this is your cost and revenue axis. This is your number of units. We talked earlier on that you might have a budgeted output in terms of units that you've planned. And the difference, of course, is between that and your actual break-even. And what is break-even? Break-even is the point where you make no profits, where your total revenue is equal to your total costs, and you hit this point exactly. And up to then, you're always making a loss, and post that period, you are making a profit. And that's kind of how we see that. So yeah, so you need to be comfortable with this curve, with just being able to see it. Yes, I've talked about margin of safety already. In this scenario, you do have another type of curve, but this is now introducing the variable cost. We don't have the fixed cost line. You can see it's parallel to your total cost curve. It literally is a shift. The shift is really the fixed cost, isn't it? That's really what we're seeing here. That's what's really going on. And then you have here the difference between your variable cost and your sales revenue, which is your contribution. And again, nothing different, same thing. Your losses here, profits here. You would have your margin of safety between what you budgeted and what you actually have. Now, another curve that we tend to see, and we'll see a bit more when we look at the next section. This is when I'm only dealing with one product, and this is really focusing on just profits and the number of units, right? This is sort of saying that here you're starting all the way at a loss of 20,000. When I say a loss of fixed cost, ultimately, if you don't sell any products, you still have this fixed cost to bear. So you can see questions asking you, what is this point? And that's your fixed cost or your rent. That's the actual fixed cost. At break even, you make no profits, no profits, no profits or losses. Yes, that sort of thing over there. And of course, up till then, you only have losses. And of course, post that, you're making profit. So it's literally the same section. It's that area of what we saw up there. We're just now putting that on its own curve, but the focus is on profit and loss as your y-axis and your x-axis as your units. Yes. And that's your profit volume chart. So again, you can see the key point of all of this is that we're able to carry out what I mentioned right at the beginning of the class as these what if analysis scenarios where we can compare, we can impute different figures to see how many items or how many items we would need to sell to hit break even if we increase the selling price, if we drop this cost, to see how this would affect our margin of safety. You can see here 0.1 fixed cost scenario 1 as opposed to this scenario where you're able to manipulate by you putting new figures in. You can see scenario 2, probably by selling at a higher price, we now have a change in the curve where we're able to hit our fixed costs much early on. Yes, and I think that's kind of the aim of this experiment ultimately, when you create these graphical, and you just have to be able to read them. Oops, sorry. You just have to be able to read what's going on to kind of to answer questions as opposed to plotting the graph, Cool, great stuff. That brings us to the end of this one, this section, and I'll see you in the next video.